Before we sort of just deal with those points on the screen there, let me firstly say that what happened in September 2010, and it came as a bit of a shock, because I don't know about you good people, but I had no idea that the SIA, the regulator, was a quango. I don't know if anyone in the audience knew that. On a show of hands, did anyone here know that before? You did know. Congratulations. Got some smart people in the audience. Had no idea it was a quango. I knew it was an agency of the Home Office, but when you saw the list of bodies that the government were then going to burn, as they called it, the burning of the quangos, some of them, I don't know, were dealing with a collection of butterflies in Cumbria and all this kind of stuff. And then you see a regulator of an important industry like ours being designated as a quango. So it came as a shock to me. I was overseas at the time in the Middle East, and the phones were hot, backwards and forwards to London, thinking, what the hell can we do about this? This is madness. Because many of us had worked very hard, many of you worked very hard, I know some faces in the audience, for years to sort of help develop the credibility of regulation in this country. Suddenly it was all being knocked over with all of these quangos. And all credit to the BSIA for putting their weight and energy behind the establishment of what was an ad hoc body, and you use the term conglomerate, which the Security Regulation Alliance was. And actually, when it first started, it was called the Security Alliance, and we had to change it to the Security Regulation Alliance, because apparently it clashed with another similar named body. And that's neither here nor there. The fact is that we as an industry, I think for the first time ever, and where's Mike Weiss? He's there, and he's the chair of IPSA. It was a unique situation where we came together to say, let's take the government on, head on this very important issue. There we had a situation where the regulator was simply going to be abolished, not reformed, not changed, but done away with. And those of you who remember the bad old days of criminality in the industry before regulation would, like many of us, have been absolutely horrified to have heard that. So the SRA came into being, and what was really important here is that we had an institution of scale like the BSIA with resources that could act as a core at the centre to harness the support from different organisations. We felt it was important to have a single body representing the industry in the representations and lobbying with Her Majesty's government. James Kelly, of course, the CEO of the BSA, put himself right in the middle of that. And other organisations that supported the initiative were the Institute, IPSA, Worship Company, Don Randall, people like Bobby Logue from Infolog, people like Brian Seamus, some of the leading security journalists and media people got behind this initiative. And thank goodness everyone did. So what were the responses? First of all, a very clear and dynamic response, which is you cannot just abolish regulation. Do you want to go back to the bad old days of door supervisors having criminal records, of security companies being owned by people with criminal records and criminal activities? And so we were able to put pressure on the government, and this was acknowledged by the Home Secretary, it was acknowledged by people in the Home Office, and we were able to get them, to influence them, because what we didn't do is, when I say we went head to head, it wasn't wagging a finger, it was more a case of, as they would say in Arabic, Dir balak, beware, take care that you don't cause a major problem in terms of criminality in the United Kingdom. So we're able to get them to soften the message from abolition to reform. And I think you'll agree with me, I think most people in the room would agree with the fact that there was a need to revisit the methodology behind regulation. In the early days, you had a situation of licensing 360,000 security operatives. Now, when you consider that there are only, I think, 125,000 police officers in the country, 360,000 security operatives is a lot of people to license. And wasn't it a bit bizarre that the actual companies that employ these people weren't licensed themselves? So we were able to sort of use this opportunity in our discussions with HMG, with the Home Office, to have a rethink of the whole methodology, the style of regulation. And so The chair of the SIA, Baroness Ruth Hennig, whose contribution cannot be overstated. She really harnessed, I think what Ruth Hennig managed to do is to really bring the SIA to the industry table rather than the other way around. She was able to, you know, abolish any ear gaps between those of us that work in this great industry and with the regulator, and she acted as a great conduit, supported by her very able CEO, Bill Butler, and working alongside the SRA to identify a way forward. So there's a lot of goodwill, is really what I'm saying here. A lot of common sense prevailed. And so it was decided that business licensing would come in to replace the individual licensing of 360,000 individuals. Many of you will probably work with or for companies that are members of the ACS scheme, the Approved Contractor Scheme. And in a sense, I've always looked upon the ACS scheme as, apart from being recognition of standards and competencies in an organisation, I think it also was a kind of substitute for business licensing. And so I think there was always recognition that at some point the actual businesses needed to be looked at, checking the probity of the directors, the financial probity of the organisations. So we've maximised this opportunity to focus on business licensing. Now, what we did, and what Ruth Hennig and Bill Butler did, is they opened up this debate into a strategic consultation group, the SCG, which I've had both the privilege and sometimes the stress of being involved with for the last 2.5, 3 years, because there have been some very stressful moments. A large number of people sitting around that table, representatives of key organisations, but also from the Home Office and from the devolved governments of Northern Ireland and Scotland. So a lot of politics with a capital P around that table. And I don't know if any of you, I'm sure some of you have been involved in this kind of thing before, but trying to get such a large group of people to find common ground and agree on the way forward is no easy thing. But the SCG continues to function, and I think, Trevor, it's been a major factor in getting the change in regulation focused and in putting pressure on HMG, to the extent that a few of us from the SCG were able to meet with the Minister, with Lord Taylor, at the Home Office a few months ago, and tell him to his face what we think, in a very candid and direct fashion. Not as in a confrontational way, not as enemies, but as friends. This is the way things have to be. So this has been an absolutely major factor in establishing what will be a new regime very soon. So what is the current situation? Well, we had the consultation results, or the actual consultation rather, issued in December. And I believe the last time we had an SCG meeting, there'd been something like 750 responses, which is amazing. In fact, the Home Office said they've never had that level of response to a consultation process ever. The BSIA submitted its response in January. There was an industry-wide response. I know that through the Security Institute we pushed out emails, and lots of our members have responded as well. And the Home Office are considering the BSIA response separately. So before I part company with you, and I know that I'm not going to take the wind out of your sails, Trevor, because you're going to be talking about dates and timelines and what the sort of schedule is for all of this. But I just want to reiterate our pride, and I think it should be your pride too, in how this industry came together to take the government on what was a daft decision, and you can quote me on that, to abolish the BSIA, and on a very good outcome where we now have a very clear and sensible way forward.